Thank you.
Thanks very much for asking me to come and talk about this. Everybody knows we've got this database now, and we're trying to make the database more useful in many ways to different things that people do in their lives, and this is becoming a more important thing in our professional life. So we're trying to do some degree of bespoke analyses for these various meetings as they come up, and that's the idea. Firstly, I'd like to say that this has now become quite a big team event, analysing this database. It's gone beyond the ability of one or indeed two people to do it. So there's some acknowledgements I'd like to get out first. Graham Hickey is an analyst we were fortunate in appointing from a research grant we got from Heart Research UK. And he's very smart in terms of managing data and also in doing the statistics. And what I will show you he's done. I'd also like to acknowledge Stuart Grant, who's a junior surgeon who works with me in Manchester, who's done a huge amount of work in terms of getting the data cleaned, and until it's clean, it's useless. And I'd also like to acknowledge somebody called Kate McAllister, who's a PhD student who's done a lot of the work that we'll show today as well. So the system's changed slightly for all this data. So it gets, you all collect it when you do your operations, and the database managers support that process. It gets submitted now to CCAD at NICOR, which is at UCL, National Institute for Cardiovascular Outcomes Research. That then gets extracted from there to Manchester, where we do all the stuff to it. And that process is all compliant with all the appropriate legislation, etc., etc., etc. And when we get that extract, we go through a series of steps in this. And it's more complicated than possibly it should be, but it's essential to get this right, otherwise you get it terribly wrong. And that's about making sure that you don't have any duplicates in there, making sure that, say, for example, you come in and have an isolated CABG after admission, and then you have an aortic dissection on the second post-operative day, and then you die. What have you died of from a surgical audit perspective? So it's having a series of rules about that. That's, in that situation, we would allocate the mortality to the isolated CABG as the first procedure in the spell. We then produce various flags. You'd have thought it was easy. It's easy to say what an aortic valve replacement is, but actually it's not quite so easy because there's different fields you look at. And so we attribute flags to that. We map that to spells, and then we do the analyses. And we do all that stuff, and we're pretty comfortable with the way we do it. And that's all now automated in a statistical package called R, and it's available for anybody to look at and tweak as they wish if they want to clean things slightly differently. So this is data on the sort of number of isolated CABG operations over the last how many years. So this is from the annual report from NICOR. So this goes up to the end of March 2011. And you can see that the number of isolated CABGs kind of came down a little bit. And we look at that in terms of the numbers in the procedure per million. In terms of sort of performance measures, this is the number of people who get an isolated CABG who get a lemur to the LAD. So it's now over 95%. I'd leave DT to tell us whether it should actually be 100% or not, but it's certainly been going up over time. And this is the proportion which is off-pump surgery, and obviously there's a good debate around the benefits and risks of that, but that's what it is in the UK. And this is the proportion of coronary surgery these days which is urgent, which is going up and up as more routine management of acute coronary syndromes. So it's up to just under 40%. And what's interesting, you don't need to look at the names at all. This is all in the public domain. But the point here is that some hospitals do a huge amount, and more than 50% of their coronary surgery is urgent, and some people do much less than that. So there are very different pathways that people take when they deal with these people. What's wrong, what's right, how much that will be forced by commissioning processes, whether there's guidelines which should be more actively monitored to ensure that this is more ubiquitous. But there's obviously complicated things in there, but there is quite significant variance in that. So I don't have a keyboard here, so somebody, IT, might be able to click that hyperlink for me. Is that a possibility? At the back there, can we click that hyperlink, please? Behind you. It's behind you. Sounds like a pantomime.
I think I'll take Chairman's action and call that a no. There you go.
Okay. This is, right, okay. So this is the Blue Book online. So we wrote the big Blue Book, which people might have seen a few years ago, but we've now put a series of filters on this so you can do it all in real time. So whoever's behind the screen, can you scroll down, or can you click on how many operations are carried out each year? Yeah, perfect. And if could you click on the arrow by all cardiac surgery there on that little drop down menu, and click isolated first time CABG. Yeah, great. So that tells you how many, and if you can just scroll the screen up a little bit so we can see the bottom of that table, that shows you the number each year. So if you could click on all hospitals there for me. And then maybe click on, choose a hospital, any hospital. John Radcliffe, for example. Click on that. That's the number done at the Radcliffe each year. So what we're trying to do is make this available, so rather than me have to come and give a talk every year so you can see this data, you can do it all yourselves from home on your sofa. Can we just go down to the actual outcomes of the operations now? So if you, again, click on the all cardiac surgery thing there. Yeah. Isolated first-time CABG. So that's the national mortality rate. We're not giving that data in the public domain at this particular stage by hospital, but that's the national mortality rate, which is obviously coming down 1.6% overall for that. Okay, and scroll down the page a little bit further, please. And again, click on the all cardiac surgery box, isolated first-time CABG. Yeah, so that's the predicted mortality sort of going up over time as we know more and more elderly people and high-risk patients are coming to surgery. And just go down to what's written. Yeah, okay, great. If you click on isolated CABG there, yeah, and show more. Okay, so that gives you the incidence of all the various risk factors, both numerically and in graphical form. So you can see again the age. Just go down to some of those graphs for me, please. Yeah, so the age going up, the proportion of females coming down, the emergency salvage staying relatively stable but a fairly low basis. So the data's out there. So if anybody's interested in digging this into a bit more, this is going live tomorrow. So that'll be available for people to play with. Okay, go back to PowerPoint, please. Okay. So we've been looking quite hard at this issue about the benefits or not of bilateral mammaries from the database. And we know that there's quite a lot of literature out there which suggests that it's beneficial to patients, but we know that it's not found significant take-up at large across the community. So we've tried to look into that to see what we can glean from the databases, waiting definitive results from RCTs. Next slide, please. Or I can do that myself now. Thank you for your help, wherever you are. So what we were looking to do is to test a hypothesis about whether double rather than a single mammary has an effect on in-hospital mortality or indeed survival. So we've looked at all records, April 2000 to March 2011. This has actually been quite a complicated bit of work for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I won't bore you with right now. We've excluded some patients from this, but it's a big sample that we've got. So it's 190,000 that we started off with, and then we exclude people, as shown there in those boxes. So the final cohort was at just under 140,000, of which 131,000 single mammaries and 6,000 bilateral mammaries. So these are big numbers. And we've put this through our sort of cleaning processes, and we've filled in missing data using multiple imputation. When we do the governance analyses, if the risk factor's not there, we assume it's missing because we feel you have to earn the risk for governance, and we've agreed that through business meetings in the past. But for this, we've used multiple imputation processes for this, and we've done propensity matching, 1 BEMA to 3 CEMAs, having built the appropriate model, which I'll show just now. And we've looked at sensitivity analysis on the final things, whole cohort, patient age, diabetes, and surgeon volume after feedback from colleagues on that particular one. And these are the variables that went in the propensity score. So again, pre-matching, the groups were quite different, as you would expect. So, I mean, if you just look at the top, the age of the BEMAs was younger, but they're different with respect to all those risk factors. And importantly, off-pump, they're also really quite different. So the BEMA surgeons do much more off-pump surgery. So these groups are different. But actually, after our matching, they were much closer matched there. But there was still a difference, but it wasn't so big between the off-pump CEMAs and BEMAs. So that's what we got after our matching process. So the matching worked, and it's just this off-pump thing, which is slightly not matched, which is why we did the sensitivity analysis in there. So in terms of in-hospital mortality, there was a significant effect on in-hospital mortality related to bilateral mammary. So if you have a bilateral mammary operation, you are more likely to die in hospital. And that effect is small numerically, but statistically significant. And that was robust to these various sensitivity analyses, including surgeon volume. But there's a positive effect on terms of survival. So you can see your odds ratio between the first 30 days was 1.5, and your odds ratios from 30 days onwards is 0.5. So you're more likely to die in hospital if you have a bilateral mammary operation, but you're more likely to be alive down the line. And that's the kind of survival curve that you see from that. So our conclusions from that have been associated with a significant risk of in-hospital mortality, a reduced survival for the first 30 days, but after that, a survival advantage. And there's no significant interaction, including surgeon volume, importantly, on the in-hospital stuff. So what does that mean? It means quite a lot of things, really. It basically means that we should be doing, in my view, more double mammary surgery than we are at the moment. It means, in my view, that we should be saying to patients when we do it, actually, there are slightly greater risks with doing this, but you're more likely to be alive down the line if we do, and so that's part of the informed consent process. It means also, in my view, that we need to do some serious consideration about our governance processes, because our governance processes reporting on in-hospital mortality of individual surgeons, actually what you are encouraging to do is something which has got a short-term benefit to the surgeon, but a long-term risk to the patient. And I think we need to work out exactly how we factor that in, and I've been thinking about that a little bit. And I think finally what we need to understand is why there's this increased mortality in these BEMA groups, and what we can do to actually close that gap so everybody's up on the deal with no short-term risk. So that's what we've done for this. We've been working on this quite hard. This is actually quite a complicated bit of work I've tried to summarise here. And we're looking to get that finished off. The paper's pretty much written. We need to put it through a sort of an SCTS peer review process, so we get some input from some double mammary surgeons, some single mammary surgeons, happy with the whole thing, and then get it out there. So yeah, I hope there's something in there of interest.
Ben, thank you very much. May I just take this opportunity to congratulate you and your team on this immense and powerful work you've done for the whole society. I would like to open this to questions from the audience.
The online blue book, how behind are you? How current is it?
The online blue book goes up to the end of March 2011, but in the next few weeks, everybody will be getting back their data to the end of March 2012 for validation. And as soon as they've validated that data, we will update the blue book online to the end of March 2012. And we aim to be updating this quarterly in arrears, if you like. So when we update it, it'll be about, I don't know, 15 months in arrears, possibly. But when we aim to roll that forward over the next 12 months to have it so it's 3 months in arrears.
I mean, the reason I mention that is because, as you know, from it's in-house urgent cabbage is now sequin, and that's had a tremendous effect on certainly our practice in Sheffield.
I'm aware of that. And what we're aiming to is, we've got a whole suite of tools around this transparency to give people their data back in a more timely fashion, in a more robust fashion, to try and get where we should be on this. And building these tools has been more difficult than I would have hoped, but I'm pretty confident we've got them in place. So like I say, this will be up to the end of March 2012 by maybe 6 weeks' time, and then we'll try and bring it forwards. I can't believe there's no questions to that. I've just told you double mammaries are killing people in hospital, and you're all not doing them, and they give people a survival advantage. What's going on with you? I couldn't have been more controversial if I'd have tried.
Just a simple question, Ben. You mentioned that the other arterial grafts were excluded. Does that mean if it was 2 mammaries and a radial, they're not in there?
Yes, that's right. They're not in there.
Skew? Could that be part of the reason you're getting this mortality?
I don't know, really. I think there's limitations in what we do, and the point of putting this through a proper sort of internal peer review process is to get those kind of views fed in and to think through what they mean. I mean, this is a little bit, on this one, sort of slightly damned if we did, damned if we didn't type of thing, but what we wanted to try and do is to try and keep it as clear a comparison as possible, a cleanest comparison as possible, which is why we did it the way we did it. Maybe that was wrong, but that's what we decided to do.
Ben, thanks. A great presentation as always. The thing about the 2 mammaries, I think there is a lot of evidence in the literature of long-term benefits. Excuse me. But in the ART trial, we published the 1-year outcome, and many of the people in this room were in that trial, where we randomized 3,100 patients to single or bilateral internal mammary arteries, and the 30-day mortality in both groups was 1.2%. That's the most definitive piece of evidence in the literature that using 2 mammary arteries does not increase in-hospital mortality. Furthermore, at 1 year, and this is published, it's in the literature, the 1-year mortality in both groups, single and bilateral mammary arteries, both 2.2% at 1 year. So I would absolutely refute that there is an increase in in-hospital mortality, at least on the class 1A evidence of a large randomized trial.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, isn't it? So the facts of the matter is in a randomized trial in which it's set up around a randomized trial, you have the findings that you have. But in a registry data with all comers, which isn't set up as a randomized trial, you have the evidence that you have. And it's always this debate, isn't it, between extrapolating randomized trial stuff to real world, which is why you need to sit registries against randomized trials and understand the different signals that are in there, because there are clear signals in this particular thing, which I think we just need to be aware of.
Hello.
Hi.
Ben. Max Codispoti from Papworth. Ben, you know a lot more statistics than any of us in the room, probably.
I know a man who knows a lot more statistics than you do. It's a slightly different thing.
Can you both help me understand then why, after such an accurate propensity matching with such large number of patients, you have decided to carry on with the analysis despite having significant differences in very important variables such as age, diabetes, off-pump versus on-pump?
Well, we propensity match to correct for those important differences. That's the point of a propensity match. And actually, after we did the propensity matching, the groups were quite well matched with everything apart from off-pump surgery, which was a lot closer matched than it was before, but not as close as we might have liked it. But if you then start matching specifically on every individual variable, you get the sample size is too small and you lose the power. So again, that's a limitation of propensity matching scores. But I mean, after the matching, the groups are really quite comparable. And we went for 3-to-1 just because we could, and because it gives you more power in terms of your findings.
Hello, Peter Kapitein from Rotterdam, Netherlands. In the art trial that David just mentioned, there was a 16% crossover from patients that were actually randomized to double mammary artery grafting and who received single artery mammary grafting. Of course, what you show is not an intention to treat analysis. Could you comment on that, how that could have influenced your results, or maybe those put them into perspective from the ARTS trial?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. I am a simple registry analyst. I don't understand some of the trial science in the way that you guys do. You probably give a better answer to that, Peter, than I would do. I find the whole intention to treat thing quite a complicated kind of concept to really genuinely get my head around it. And what I kind of always say about the registries trials is, you know, they are what they are. This is kind of what it is. Exactly what it means is open to a bit of interpretation, but the facts are relatively straight.
Yes, so it might be interesting for David to look at the per protocol analysis and the 30-day mortality, see whether there's a difference in the mortality. Because that's what you do, more per protocol analysis than the intention to treat analysis.
Yeah.
David Quinn from Birmingham. Over the period of time, which was quite a long period of time for the mammary study, did you notice geographical differences around the country, and have they changed with time? I know you haven't presented that data, but as you were analysing it, did the spread of use of beamers begin to become even over time, or is it very much isolated to certain units?
What I want to do, okay, whether I'll be allowed to do this, but what I want to do with the database is to produce this concept of an e-lab, whereby we have 450,000 patients sitting on a database with a whole bunch of fields with a bunch of cleaning code in there. And we've done this on a pretty clever kind of software platform, which is developed at Manchester University, whereby we can potentially give access to interested researchers to the core data to do things. So if we've done something like this, you could potentially go into what we've done and say, okay, this is what you've done, these are the cleaning codes that you've done, and these are the findings that you've got. But actually, I think it would be interesting to see how is there a time effect in this? Is there a geographical effect in this? So to add greater knowledge from the data set by allowing people who are independently asking questions of the core data to do that. And so we have a sort of a limited resource in a way, and what we're trying to do is set this up in such a way so the sort of question that you can answer, you could go in and answer for whatever purposes you have. That's kind of where I want to get with it. So that was a sort of semi-elegant way of not answering your question, for which I apologise.
One last question then.
Okay. Just coming back to Peter, sorry, Leslie Hamilton, Newcastle. Coming back to Peter's point, in the arts study, to get into the trial, you had to be a surgeon experienced in doing bilateral mammaries. And so by definition, that's a selected group of surgeons. And presumably this crossover business relates to them spotting the patients that they were concerned about if they did a bilateral mammary and just did a single mammary instead. Would that be enough to explain the difference in mortality?
I don't know, Leslie. I don't know. But what's interesting is that, I mean, I think it's been put forward quite a lot, actually, that surgeon volume is important for off-pump and important for double mammaries. But actually, we didn't find a surgeon volume interaction effect in this analysis. So I don't know the answer to that.
But I would just be a little concerned if the message we all take away from here is we should all rush back home and start doing bilateral mammaries without really knowing what we're doing.
Okay, I don't think that's going to happen, but thank you very much. We'll keep the time now. Thank you very much, Ben. We're going to release you now, and great.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could I then ask...